Hi guys, so I've had my RME Fireface UCX 2 for around 3 weeks and I've had a chance to put it through its paces and configure it for my own home studio. When I was looking to purchase this interface, I looked for real world user reviews and opinions and couldn't find any as it was so new. Firstly, let me just say that I'm not usually a fan of unboxing videos as I'm more interested in seeing gear in action, but as I had the UCX2 on order for a while and I was quite excited when I received it, I felt moved to do a real-time video of me unboxing it for the first time. Honestly guys, I'm a little embarrassed by that video as I suspect most of you watching this are seriously into your audio recording and will be sensitive to poor quality audio. Let's just say that in my excitement to look inside the box, I just set up the camera on my kitchen table without a lav mic, and as a result the audio quality is pretty poor. Nevertheless, for those of you who don't mind this and just can't get enough of unboxing videos, I've put a link to that video in the description so that you too can see what I found inside the box. So let me give you a brief overview of the UCX2 as I see it and the features that appealed to me about it. Let's start with the inputs and outputs. The UCX2 sits between the Babyface Pro and the UFX in RME's USB interface line. In format, it's a half rack size, so it seems aimed squarely at a home or portable rig for home producers and mixing and mastering engineers. RME describes the UCX2 as a 40 channel interface, which means that in principle, you can use it to get 20 channels of audio in and 20 channels out of your computer. Straight out of the box, however, the UCX2 only allows you to access 8 analog audio channels plus AES and SPDIF ins and outs, giving you a total channel count of 12 ins and 12 outs. So if you want the full 20, you will need to expand the unit with, for example, an ADAT mic preamp. This being said, the UCX2 comes with very generous I/O for such a physically small unit, with 2 mic preamps and 6 balanced line inputs, 2 of which on the front are switchable to instrument level for instruments such as guitar and bass, plus 8 line outputs, 2 of which are used by default by the headphone output, but can be switched to standard line level outputs too. The 6 line outs on the back are DC coupled. I didn't know what that meant, but apparently it means that it allows you to control older modular synthesizers. Those of you guys who are into that will no doubt appreciate that. It also has old style DIN or DIN MIDI ports when some of the competitors' units today have dispensed with these completely. If like me you still have some old MIDI equipment, then these are quite handy. If I'm really honest, at first glance I wasn't wowed by the I/O on the UCX2. My outgoing interface was a 19-inch rack mounted interface and it had more mic pre's and inputs plus analog outs too. And I was also hoping that my new interface might have multiple headphone outs when the UCX2 only has one. Other cheaper interfaces have this kind of stuff and some have more I/O, so why would anyone choose the UCX2, I hear you ask? Well, of course, every use case is different and you can get a very respectable recording these days from much cheaper interfaces than the UCX2 and ones which have more inputs and outputs that allow you to record your whole band, etc. This being said, the real difference with the UCX2 and a cheaper alternative is partly the overall quality of the unit, which as we'll see is exceptional, but also its configurability via the TotalMix software, which makes the I/O very powerful indeed. More of this later. The Fireface UCX2, to give it its full title, is RME's update to the Fireface UCX, which has been around for a number of years and which was, until the release of the UCX2 this year, still going strong. One of the things that RME is known for is the fact that their equipment is built to last and is supported into the future. This can be seen by the fact that RME writes its own drivers, and to date they have a track record of supporting even older, discontinued equipment, with drivers for the latest operating systems. This is not a particularly exciting feature of an interface, but let me just say that it's no small thing. I've first-hand experience of other manufacturers not doing this, and it's a chief reason for me changing my interface at this time, as the control software of my previous interface had ceased to be supported by the latest version of Windows 10. Even the latest interfaces of top brands are not immune to driver issues. Before buying the UCX2, I bought an interface of a competitor of RME's, and after more than a week of wasted time speaking to their support team and trying to get the control software to recognise the interface on my computer, I ended up returning it to the retailer and pre-ordering the UCX2. The UCX2 could not be more different. On the day I got it, I downloaded the driver from the RME website and switched on the unit, and it just worked, with no fuss or configuration issues, and it's worked every time since. The productivity gains of gear which just works reliably and consistently are huge. Indeed, such is RME's UK distributors' confidence in their gear remaining operational into the future that you can register with them for a 5-year warranty. Allied to the stability is the build quality, and everything about the UCX just screams to me well built, from its heavy weight down through its rugged metal construction to the utilitarian XLR and jack sockets that are fitted there. Apart from perhaps the multifunction jog wheel on the front, which sits proud of the unit, which I'm minded to be very careful of, it all feels like a piece of gear you'd be happy to take on the road. RME describes the UCX2 as the most powerful and portable RME audio USB interface. Given that even their flagship USB interface, the UFX Plus, is rack mountable and portable, I'm not entirely clear what they mean by this, except I suppose that the UCX2 is smaller and therefore more portable. Nevertheless, it certainly packs a punch. It's really what's under the hood, so to speak, of RME products that differentiates them from cheaper alternatives. I'm not a technician, but I understand that all audio interfaces need accurate clocking to ensure the audio is synced up accurately. Like the Babyface Pro and UFX interfaces, the UCX2 uses RME's proprietary Steady Clock FS, which is meant to reduce jitter or variations in the clock frequency down to extremely low levels, which they say makes for reference grade analog to digital conversion. This is a nice to know, but it's not something I have the ability to test, so I have to take the word of others who seem to know about this kind of thing and underline RME's prowess in this area. See the link I have put in the corner of the screen for a review in which this is covered. Another aspect of UCX's processing power is that they have loaded it with a powerful hardware digital signal processor, which, allied to RME's very powerful TotalMix FX software, transforms a device from just an audio interface into something much more. More of which later. RME takes pride in producing very low latency or time delay in their conversion of the signal from analog and digital and vice versa. For me, this is key because I'm a guitarist and I use plugins like Bias FX 2, which provides amp and effects simulation within my digital audio workstation. Those of you who know this kind of software will know that if you have any discernible latency at all, it renders the software unusable. Latency is a complicated thing because it's affected by the size of the project, the number of plugins you're using, and affected by the computer itself. But on an average project, I've been finding that I've been getting latency which is completely undetectable when monitoring my guitar parts during tracking. Another feature RME pride themselves in are very low noise, transparent mic pre's which represent the sound accurately. Whilst I'm aware that others might seek some coloration of the sound and that other interface manufacturers make a selling point of this, my view is that I'd rather do my coloration intentionally with plugins or external mic pre's rather than have it on everything I record by default. My real life experiences of this so far have been that UCX2 sounds very clean with little or no coloration of the sound, so that it accurately reflects the audio sources I'm putting into it, which is great. So again, you might be saying that lots of interface manufacturers ship their gear with software which allows you to mix audio in the interface. I've had experience with a number of these and was skeptical about the power of TotalMix myself. What I've found though is that while some others have been very good, none have come close to the signal routing flexibility and power of TotalMix, allied to the fact that the processing is done on the unit, so it's not using up the memory and CPU of your computer to do it. Initially it takes a little while to get your head around this, but the power of TotalMix FX comes from the ability to produce submixes for every output on the device from every input, both the physical inputs and the computer inputs from the computer itself and digital audio workstation. This is the ace in the pack for TotalMix, as it allows for some very creative routing possibilities. To show you what I mean, when I click on any of the outputs in this bottom row of Total Effects, you get a different mixer view above and can adjust what's sent to that output, like so. When I click back to the other outputs, you'll see that I get a separate mix for each of those outputs. You can even route the output back into TotalMix to output them to your DAW or for broadcast software like OBS, as I'm doing here, using this loopback function. As an example of my own configuration, I've created a second headphone output which I've routed out of analog outputs 3 and 4 to create a second headphone mix for when I'm tracking other artists or musicians in my studio. Another thing I've been able to do is that I use Wave's NX virtual monitoring software in Cubase, which gives me the effect of listening to monitor speakers through my headphones. However, I only want this plugin on the headphone output and not on the main outputs when listening through my monitor speakers or exporting my track once mixed. So using TotalMix, I've routed the Cubase control room headphone output with the plugin to my headphones and the main output to my speakers without the plugin. Simple, but it stops me making a costly mistake of accidentally exporting my track with the NX plugin on the main outputs. TotalMix allows me to save monitoring sessions for particular projects or use cases, and it can even be controlled externally with iPads by me or other musicians to control monitoring levels remotely for larger recording sessions with more musicians. It also has a control room section of its own from which I can set up talkback to the musician's headphones. On top of this, you can add dynamics processing, EQ and effects to the inputs too, which allows me to create a zero latency signal chain for recording with compression, expansion, reverb and delay, which can really improve singer or musician's performance. RME is sufficiently confident in the robustness of TotalMix and the hardware of the UCX2 to suggest that it can be used live as a digital mixer. As in non-pandemic times, I often play live. This will be very interesting to me. Although if I take the UCX2 on the road, I may buy the optional rack mount ears to afford it some more protection. To top it all, the UCX2 is class compliant, and for the princely sum of £3 here in the UK, you can download a fully functioning version of TotalMix for the iPad, allowing you to have all that routing power and recording ability in a totally portable device. One final trump card, which I can also see myself using in live applications, is that the UCX2 is the latest in RME's interfaces to receive DUREC, which allows you to record from its inputs directly to a USB memory stick. This is a feature found on some digital mixing desks, and in a live context I can see myself using it to create tracks which I can mix later for live recordings, or to create virtual sound checks where it's not possible to have all the musicians together when setting up the sound system. All in all, I've only had the UCX2 a short while, and I know that many of you will think that we are still in the honeymoon period, and perhaps we are. But to summarise my experience with it so far, it just works. It is sophisticated, but when you get your head around it, it's not too complicated. And I'm realising after just a short time how much I have come to regard it as the new hub for my studio for the future, as well as a powerful tool for live and broadcast applications. In these days where more and more of us are setting up small home studios in limited spaces, it definitely packs a punch for its small size. Of course, this is just my opinion. To summarise, here are what I think are the pros and cons of the UCX2. In its favour are its small form factor, its pro audio build quality, RME's reputation for stability, ruggedness, audio quality and stellar conversion, its very low latency, the transparency of its mic preamps, its amazing TotalMix software, its onboard DSP and effects, and finally, is direct to USB recording. I feel I should add some negatives for the sake of balance, so if I had to be picky, here's what I'd say. It has a relatively small native I/O count, and this needs to be expanded if you need more inputs or outputs. For some applications that will be the case, but for many it will be fine. Even when expanded, it may not be enough for bigger applications. If this is the case and your budget permits, you could consider its big brother, the UFX. It doesn't have any coloration and the sound of its preamps. I realise some may want this, even though I don't. And finally is cost. It isn't cheap and therefore it will not be within everyone's budget. But then at the same time, I think that few people who try it would disagree that it's a very good example of the old adage, you get what you pay for. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye for now.
Stuff all day long. Let's all get to know our neighbors.